Hello everyone, White Witch 110 here. Welcome back. I'll continue now with my personal paranormal experiences. That's a little feather you're seeing there. This guy stays outside in the summer, spring, summer, and fall. So he's a little dusty. Over the years, I have heard conversations in different locations when no one is there to create one. My ex-husband is an American. On one occasion, he and I were at a cemetery in the United States looking for his father's grave. He had stopped the car at one spot, then decided to drive to the bottom of the section and walked back toward the top in search of the grave. We hadn't walked far when I informed him that his father was telling me he was where the car had been parked before. He replied with a strange, disbelieving look. Once again, I repeated the message. Upon locating his father's grave, I looked up and pointed where the car was parked before. Indeed, the car had been parked in line with the grave when we first stopped. He could not believe it. I went further to express that his father was happy he was here, which he laughed at, seeing the nationalities of the people in the graves beside him. But I reiterated my statement. He is happy where he is. My ex-husband placed a U.S. Air Force flag on his father's grave and we left. Leaving the cemetery, I watched the flag flap towards us the entire way, although the wind was only blowing in one direction. On another visit months later, his brother and young son were with us. The atmosphere was settled at first, and his father was happy that his sons were there to visit. The atmosphere became unsettled when the young grandson bounded out of the car towards the grave. In a panic, I emphasized his father didn't want the child there and to get him back into the car. I did not receive a reason from his father as to why he wanted him back in the car. I had bought our son a Thomas the Tank Engine Christmas ornament for the tree. When you pushed on the top, his whistle would sound. Sorry about that. It's actually cooler outside. Okay, whistle would sound. On this evening, my ex-husband was sitting in the living room reading the paper, and my son was in his room, and I was in the kitchen washing dishes. I heard the whistle and went into the living room to see who had touched it. My ex-husband was still sitting in his chair, and our son came running from his room. They both said they had not touched it, and that was obvious. I went back into the kitchen to continue washing up, and they went back to what they were doing. Seconds later, the whistle sounded again. I ran. Just steps, hoping to catch one of them touching it, but neither of them was by the Christmas tree, and this time the ornament was swinging on the branch. We had all been in our places as before. At this point, I felt someone was with us. I told my ex-husband the visitor was not from my family, so it must be from his. He proceeds to say that his mother's father had worked on the railway in the States. For me, that answered who had touched the train, but as to why, we didn't know. Maybe just to let him know he was around. Now the next part is historical Toronto. One fall day, a friend of mine was signing up for classes at the University of Toronto and asked me to come along, so I did. I had heard stories of the campus being haunted for a few years now. One story I remembered was regarding a set of wooden doors. The story was that the man who carved them was caught in a love triangle and was killed by the jealous boyfriend. I went with my friend and watched students sign up for fall classes. Once finished, she was anxious to show me around. Walking through the hallway, I got a chill that didn't last long, but I said nothing to her until we stopped before going outside. Then I mentioned the story of the death and the doors to her. As it turns out, if you haven't already guessed, where I felt the chill, that was the doors in question. I couldn't believe it. Of course I wanted to go back and see the doors, but she didn't, so we continued walking. I didn't get a picture of the doors, unfortunately. Whoops, sorry about that. There is a historical home at 82 Bond Street in downtown Toronto. The house is called properly Mackenzie House. It was owned by Toronto's first mayor, William Lyon Mackenzie. He served as mayor from 1834 to 1835. Mackenzie House is a 3-story brick Greek Revival row house built in 1858. It is the only surviving house from the row. William Lyon Mackenzie was born in Dundee, Scotland on March 12, 1795, and died in Toronto on August 28, 1861, of an apoplectic seizure. On my visit there, I joined a group for a tour. The group climbed the stairs to the second floor where the bedrooms were. Crossing the threshold into Mr. Mackenzie's room, it became difficult for me to breathe, so I slowly began making my way to the hallway. This feeling stayed with me until I exited the room. Years later, a television program, Ghost Trackers, sent a teen in to explore the house. Up in Mackenzie's bedroom, he had the same problem breathing as I did. A coincidence? I don't think so. And here is a photo of Bond Street. And it's also said that the printing press can be heard, but it is locked in the evenings. And this is William Lyon Mackenzie. The same program mentioned above also featured the Mimico Asylum. My ex-husband took my son and I to check it out one evening after the program had aired. The Asylum is one of the oldest groups of buildings in Toronto. It opened as Mimico Lunatic Asylum in 1889. In 1911, the name was changed to Mimico Hospital for the Insane. In 1919, it was changed again to Ontario Hospital, then renamed Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital. It closed in 1979. It sits on 52 acres. The building is now closed to any paranormal investigating. Humber College now uses it as part of their campus. My son and I made our way around the building taking pictures. We both agreed that there was a spirit watching from the 3rd floor window. The name Mary came to me, but due to my limited use of the internet at the time, I had no idea how or where to look for an archive of names associated with the hospital. In our photos, you could make out a misty form. In that one window, we felt a presence watching. In the following week, we found the cemetery that was used for the asylum patients, but were unable to get inside the fenced area, which is close to the highway. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find the photo that I took, but if I do find it, I will show you. But this is one of the buildings. I will tell you a little bit. Ottawa Lennox chapter. When my current husband and I moved into a new apartment in 2009, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A few months in, though, the cats started becoming obsessed with the closet by our front door. We opened it and checked for mice or bugs and found none. This continued for a few months off and on. Then they lost interest. A couple of years ago, it started up again with one of our cats, Garfield, who has passed away since. We have no reasoning for this obsession, but something had their attention. One evening, a few months after moving in, while laying in bed, I felt uneasy looking through to the kitchen. We live in a bachelor apartment and use a hide-a-bed, but I couldn't see anything there. Weeks later, a black shadow of a man appeared facing in our direction. There were no features that I could see, but I knew it was a man. On another evening, my cat, Boo, which you see, and I were sitting on the sofa watching TV. I turned to look at Boo and give him a pet. His eyes were like saucers, and he was staring straight into the kitchen. I really didn't want to look, but I turned my head anyway. There, through the pass-through, I could see a rusty-colored figure forming. It was a man with, I believe, his hands on the counter by his stance. He was looking through at us on the sofa with a disgruntled feeling. I turned back to the cat, and he looked at me as if to confirm what we were seeing. I quickly turned back, and he was gone. I have not seen him in the kitchen since, but at times I do sense him there. In the early hours of the morning, in the fall, I was up to use the washroom. Looking out at the hall, I saw the bottom of a red skirt with white polka dots and crinoline. I felt that there were many people in the apartment, as though a party was being held. I could feel the joy emanating from the living room. Could be I was still asleep, but I doubt it. This was after hubby had cordoned off part of the living room with the computer desk to make a bedroom. We also noticed cat-sized shadows in the apartment from time to time. I had been seeing them for a while before my husband asked me if I had, because he was seeing them. He would see what he thought was Garfield, and Garfield would be laying by the sofa. These shadows continued to be seen. As a matter of fact, this past week. April 2018, early morning, I awoke due to a touch on my arm. I knew I wasn't dreaming. Opening my eyes, I caught sight of a white hand with an arm fading to a tail in the closet. We have now made part of our living room, as I just said, a proper bedroom. I must admit it did shake me up because I have never had this happen to me before. Somehow, I did manage to get back to sleep. As soon as I could, I smudged the entire apartment and have not had this happen again. I would like it to stay that way. When my husband and I were getting up at 4 a.m. to go to work, it wasn't uncommon for me to catch glimpses of spirits on the street. It was unnerving at first, but since changing location of job, I haven't seen anything. The reason could be that we are now up later when traffic is in full swing and concentration is elsewhere. Being an old city surrounded by water, I'm sure helps spirit materialize as much as it does. And I think I will leave it there for this evening. The next part that I'll be talking to you about is some of the historic places that the public is allowed to go into such as the Ottawa Jail Hostel, the Mackenzie Estates, Upper Canada Village, the War Museum, I believe, no, the Victorian, yes, and the Victorian Memorial Museum as well. So there'll be a few places, and I hope you'll join me for those tomorrow night. I hope everyone has had a pleasant Saturday so far. It has been a hot one here once again. It's a little cooler right now. A little cloudy, not too bad. We did think we might get some rain there for a bit, but nothing. We desperately need the rain. Our grass is still crunching. So to all my loyal subscribers, my extended YouTube family, thank you for coming by. For anyone who's new to the channel and dropping in to see what's what, please feel free to check out any of my other videos I have. If there's anything that you like, consider giving it a thumbs up. Drop me a comment, I'll get back to you. Share it out if you think anyone else would be interested. That's always appreciated. Consider subscribing. And if you do subscribe, remember to click the notification bell so that you'll know the next time I upload. So until tomorrow, as always, family, ciao for now.